Let us begin by finding a comfortable stillness, a place where the mind can rest and the body can settle into the soft embrace of relaxation. Allow your breath to deepen, slow and steady, matching the gentle rhythm of a quiet evening. We are going to drift back in time tonight, traveling to a place that feels familiar, even if you have never walked its streets. We are going to the heart of Ohio, to the mid-1970s, a time of analog slowing, where the world moved at the pace of a handwritten letter, and the night air was filled only with the sound of crickets and the distant hum of a passing car. Imagine a landscape painted in earth tones, the flat, expansive stretch of the Midwest, where cornfields sway gently in the breeze, turning gold under the late summer sun. This is Pickaway County, a name that rolls softly off the tongue, home to the small, tight-knit community of Circleville. It is a place defined by its circles, the layout of its history, the cycles of the harvest, and the invisible connections between neighbors who have known one another for generations. In 1976, Circleville was the picture of quiet American life, the kind of town where doors were left unlocked, where the twilight brought families out to their porches to watch the fireflies dance against the darkening tree line. There is a specific kind of silence in a town like this, a heavy, comfortable silence that settles over the rooftops once the sun dips below the horizon. It is a silence that feels protective, insulating the town from the noise and haste of the wider world. And yet, even in the most peaceful of silences, there are whispers, stories that drift like smoke through the screen doors and across the well-tended lawns. Our story centers on this atmosphere, on the weight of secrets and the way they travel. It begins not with a loud noise, but with the most delicate of sounds, the slide of paper against metal, the opening of a mailbox, the quiet arrival of a letter. There is something inherently nostalgic and intimate about the post. In today's world of instant connection, we often forget the tactile experience of a letter, the texture of the envelope, the specific weight of the paper stock, the unique slant and pressure of the ink. A letter is a physical object that has traveled through hands and miles to reach a specific destination. It carries the energy of the sender, sealed away, waiting to be unfolded. In Circleville, the mail was a tether to the outside and a mirror of the town itself. Bills, postcards, invitations, the mundane and the celebratory. But in the late summer of 1976, the nature of the mail began to change for a few residents. It became a vessel for a mystery that would slowly, very slowly, wrap its tendrils around the town. Let us focus on the daily routine of Mary Gillespie. Picture the life of a school bus driver in a rural district. There is a meditative quality to that job, the rhythmic opening and closing of the doors, the oversized steering wheel turning hand over hand, the view from the high windshield looking out over miles of asphalt and gravel roads. Driving a bus in the country is a solitary act for much of the day, sandwiched between the chaotic energy of the morning pickup and the afternoon drop-off. In the hours between, the bus sits empty or moves quietly back to the depot. Mary knew these roads by heart, every pothole, every twist, every farmhouse standing stoic in the fields. It was a life of routine, of predictability. But that predictability was interrupted by the arrival of the first letter. Imagine standing at the end of a long driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath your shoes. The air is warm, thick with the humidity of the Ohio River Valley. You open the mailbox, the metal hinge squeaking slightly, and pull out the stack of daily correspondence. Among the flyers and the bills, there is something different. An envelope with no return address. The handwriting is distinctive, block letters, perhaps trying to disguise the hand that wrote them, yet carrying a deliberate intent. The postmark says Columbus, the nearby city, just close enough to be local, yet far enough to provide a veil of anonymity. When Mary opened this letter, the world didn't shatter. It just shifted. The words inside were confusing. They were intimate. They spoke of things that should have been private, observations made from the shadows. The writer claimed to know things, claimed to be watching. It is a strange sensation to realize that the privacy of one's home, the sanctuary of one's life, has been observed by unseen eyes. It changes the way the sunlight looks on the floorboards. It changes the sound of the wind in the eaves. The letter accused Mary of a secret. It alleged a relationship, a connection with the local school superintendent. Whether true or false, the accusation itself was like a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples began to spread immediately, though at first they were invisible to the rest of the town. Mary kept this to herself initially, as most of us would. We try to rationalize the strange, to dismiss the unsettling. Perhaps it was a prank. Perhaps it was a mistake. She went about her days, driving the yellow bus along the winding roads, watching the cornstalks dry and rustle as autumn approached. But the feeling of being watched, that heavy, prickling sensation on the back of the neck, likely lingered. Then came another letter, and another. The writer was persistent. The tone was not frantic, but consistent, almost methodical. The letters were not just sent to Mary. They began to arrive for her husband, Ron. Imagine the confusion in a quiet household, the evenings spent sitting at the kitchen table, the fluorescent light humming overhead, looking at these pieces of paper that had invaded their sanctuary. The letters were specific. They mentioned routines. They mentioned the layout of the house. They demonstrated a knowledge of the Gillespie family's movements that could only come from someone who was close, someone who walked the same streets, shopped at the same stores, perhaps even waved in passing on the road. This is the essence of the Circleville mystery in its early days. It was not a matter of physical danger at first, but a psychological fog. It was the erosion of trust. In a small town, trust is the currency of life. You trust your neighbor to watch your house. You trust the driver in the other lane to wave. You trust that the smiles you see are genuine. The letters introduced a shadow into that trust. Who was writing them? Was it the person buying milk ahead of you at the grocer? Was it the figure sitting on a porch swing 3 houses down? Was it a friend? The handwriting became a character in the story itself. Blocky, uniform, devoid of flourish. It was designed to reveal nothing of the author's identity, yet it revealed so much about their persistence. The writers seemed to have infinite time, infinite patience. They were writing not just to one person, but to the idea of the town itself. As the weeks turned into months, the year drifted from 1976 into 1977. The landscape of Ohio changed from the gold of harvest to the stark grays and whites of winter. Snow blanketed the fields, muffling sound even further, making the isolation of the rural homes feel more profound. The long nights of winter provide ample time for writing and ample time for worrying. The letters continued to flow like a dark stream beneath the ice. They demanded that Mary stop the alleged affair. They demanded exposure. They threatened to bring the secrets into the light. And the circle of recipients began to widen. It wasn't just the Gillespies anymore. The writer began to send letters to officials, to the school board, spreading the whispers like seeds in the wind. Consider the patience required to maintain such a campaign. The physical act of writing, the purchasing of stamps, the trips to the mailbox. It was a ritual for the writer, just as reading them became a dreaded ritual for the recipients. Despite the growing tension within the Gillespie home, the town of Circleville largely continued its peaceful rhythm. The annual pumpkin show, the pride of the town, would come and go. The seasons would cycle. To the outsider, everything looked perfect. The shop fronts were clean, the lawns were raked, the church bells rang on Sunday mornings. But inside the Gillespie house, and soon in the homes of others, the atmosphere was thickening. Ron Gillespie, Mary's husband, felt the weight of it heavily. He was a man receiving letters about his wife, letters that taunted him, letters that questioned his own awareness. The psychological pressure was like a slow-moving storm front, heavy with humidity, waiting to break. There were phone calls, too. The ringing of the landline in the dead of night. In the 1970s, the telephone was a permanent fixture, tethered to the wall. You could not silence it easily. Its ring was a command. To pick it up and hear only silence, or a muffled voice, or a harsh whisper, was to let the mystery enter the room with you. Yet, through all of this, the mystery remained paper-thin. It was words on a page. It was ink and pulp. There was no face to put to the name, no figure standing in the driveway. Just the letters, arriving with the daily post, nestled between the innocuous and the ordinary. As we rest here, contemplating the beginning of this enigma, we can feel the unique texture of a pre-digital mystery. There were no digital footprints to trace, no cell tower pings, no IP addresses. There was only the physical world, the paper, the stamp, the postmark. It was a mystery of the physical realm, grounded in the geography of a small town where everyone supposedly knew everyone. Yet someone was a stranger. The writer knew the bus routes. They knew the schedules. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. And as the snow melted and the green shoots of spring began to push through the Ohio soil in 1977, the tone of the letters would begin to shift. The patience of the writer was wearing thin. The passive observation was beginning to turn into something more active, something that would eventually pull the quiet town of Circleville out of the shadows and into the national spotlight. But for now, let us linger in this twilight period, the time of the unknown, the time when the mystery was just a stack of envelopes on a kitchen table, a puzzle waiting to be solved, a secret held between the writer, the reader, and the silent, watching town. The sun sets over the Scioto River, the shadows lengthen across the cornfields, and the mailbox stands at the end of the lane, waiting for tomorrow. The morning light breaks over Circleville not with a sudden burst, but with a gradual gray lifting of the veil, revealing the damp rooftops and the quiet streets where the milk trucks and the paper boys have already made their rounds. In the spring and summer of 1977, the air in the town felt heavier than usual, thick with humidity and the unspoken tension that traveled through the telephone lines and the postal service. The letters, once a nuisance of whispered gossip, began to sharpen their edges, evolving from vague accusations into something far more direct. The focus narrowed, tightening like a lens upon the daily routes of the school bus driver, Mary. The writer, this phantom of the post office, seemed to possess an impossible knowledge of her movements, knowing precisely when the yellow bus would turn a corner, when it would stop, and who was watching. The letters began to issue commands, dark ultimatums written in that same disguised block lettering. They demanded that she stop driving the bus, stop her work, stop her perceived transgressions. Imagine the feeling of holding such a letter, the paper crisp and unassuming, the stamp perfectly ordinary, yet the message carrying a weight that pressed down on the chest. It is a peculiar kind of haunting, not by a ghost in the attic, but by a living presence that walks the same sidewalks, shops in the same grocery stores, and breathes the same Ohio air. Mary's husband, Ron, felt this weight settle upon his shoulders like a physical mantle. He was a man of the community, a man who believed in the tangible, the fixable, the seen. But how does one fix a shadow? How does one confront a voice that only speaks through ink? The atmosphere in the Gillespie home shifted from confusion to a siege mentality. The phone would ring, the shrill mechanical bell echoing through the hallway, sometimes bringing only silence on the other end, a silence that felt like it was listening. August arrived, bringing with it the drowsy heat of late summer, where the cicadas hum in a rhythmic, rising crescendo that seems to vibrate in the teeth. It was August 17, 1977. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple that faded into absolute black. The corn stood tall in the fields, walls of green rustling in the night breeze, hiding whatever lay beyond the road's edge. The phone rang again. It is said that Ron answered it. There were no words recorded, no transcript of that conversation, only the reaction. He moved with a sudden, grim purpose, a man who had finally been given a direction, a target, a name. He told his children he was going out to confront the writer. He climbed into his red pickup truck, the engine turning over with a roar that shattered the country's stillness, and he drove away from the safety of the porch light, disappearing into the dark tunnels of the rural roads. We often think of mysteries as puzzles to be solved, but in the moment, they are simply life unfolding in the dark. A man driving a truck, the headlights cutting cones of illumination through the dust, the mind racing faster than the wheels. The truck did not return. Instead, the night ended with the sound of metal against wood, a violent, sudden stop against the trunk of a tree at an intersection known as 5 Points. The silence that followed was absolute. When the authorities arrived, the red pickup was found, crumpled and still. Ron was gone. And yet, the mystery did not die with him. It merely deepened, sinking its roots further into the soil of the town. The official ruling was an accident, a tragedy of the road, perhaps fueled by drink, perhaps by anger. But there was a detail, a single, quiet detail that did not fit the narrative of a simple crash. Ron's gun had been fired. One shot, discharged into the unknown, a bullet that found no target, or perhaps a target that simply walked away into the cornfields. The town mourned, the seasons turned. The leaves of the tree at 5 Points turned gold, then brown, and fell to the earth, covering the scars on the bark. Winter came again, wrapping Circleville in a cold, white blanket, muffling the sounds of the world. One might have hoped that the letters would cease, that the writer, having seen the ultimate, tragic consequence of their game, would retreat into the void. But the ink continued to flow. The letters returned, and their gaze shifted. They began to target the sheriff now, the man charged with keeping the peace. They accused him of a cover-up, of hiding the truth about the night Ron died. The writer claimed to know how it happened, claimed to know who was there. The prose was relentless, a steady drip of poison into the community well. The writer seemed to be taunting the law, daring them to find the source, confident in their anonymity. Years drifted by in this strange stasis. 1978, 1979, the turn of the decade into the 1980s. The letters became a part of the landscape, like the water tower or the courthouse clock. People received them, read them with trembling hands, and wondered. Who among them was the watcher? Was it the neighbor pruning roses, the colleague sharing coffee, the stranger passing by on the other side of the street? We arrive now at February of 1983. The snow is melting, leaving the roads slick and muddy. Mary is still driving her bus, a testament to resilience or perhaps a refusal to be cowed by the invisible threat. She is driving her route along the quiet country roads, the engine humming a familiar tune. She sees something. It is not a letter this time. It is an intrusion into the physical world. Signs, placards placed along the fence line of her route, shouting their messages in bold paint. They are directed at her, cruel, personal, and angry. The harassment had stepped off the page and onto the roadside. Mary stopped the bus. The air was cold, the sky a flat, indifferent gray. She stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel, intending to tear down the signs, to remove the hateful words from her view. In her hand, she carried the object of her protection, a revolver, for the fear had never truly left her. As she reached for one of the signs, she noticed something peculiar. A box, attached to the fence post, tied with twine and seemingly innocuous. But something about it gave her pause. It was a box that did not belong. She opened it. Inside, resting in a bed of crude construction, was a handgun. It was rigged, a mechanical trap designed with a chilling amateur ingenuity. A string was attached to the trigger, tensioned and waiting. Had the sign been pulled in just the right way, had the angle been different, the mechanism would have snapped. The gun would have fired. It is a moment frozen in time. The realization that the writer was not just a voice, but a hand capable of constructing a machine of death. The abstraction of the threats had solidified into cold steel and wood. Mary did not pull the sign down. She retreated. The authorities were called. The silence of the country road was once again broken by sirens, by the crackle of radios, by the heavy boots of deputies. They examined the box, they examined the gun, and for the first time in years, there was something more than paper to investigate. The gun had a serial number. The serial number had been filed off, scratched away in an attempt to erase its history. But metal has a memory. With the right chemicals, with the right light, the numbers could be coaxed back to the surface. They could be made to speak. The box itself was a puzzle. It contained not just the weapon, but the intent. It was a physical manifestation of the malice that had plagued the town for nearly a decade. And as the investigators looked closer, as they turned the device over in their gloved hands, they began to see a path forward. A path that might lead away from the shadows and toward a door. The gun was traced. The records were pulled from dusty archives. The ownership was established, and the name attached to the gun was not a stranger. It was not a drifter passing through. It was a name known to the town, a name known to the victims. As the sun began to set on that cold February day in 1983, the long, suspended twilight of the Circleville mystery was about to break. The passive years of reading and wondering were over. The physical evidence had finally arrived, and with it, the machinery of the law began to turn, slowly, inevitably, toward a man who had once been a brother-in-law, a friend, a neighbor. The town held its breath. The letters had been a voice in the dark. Now, the town prepared to see a face. But as we know, in stories such as these, seeing a face is not always the same as seeing the truth. The shadows were receding, but they were not yet gone. The seasons turned, as they always do, indifferent to the dramas of human life, melting the snow that had hidden the trap and bringing the soft, green promises of an Ohio spring. The investigation, once a chaotic storm of rumors and fears, settled into the orderly, quiet rhythm of the courtroom. The name that had been whispered, Paul Freshour, was now spoken aloud, etched into the official record, a tangible answer to a riddle that had plagued the town for years. There is a certain heaviness to a courtroom, a solemn, wooden stillness where the air feels thick with the weight of history. The proceedings moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a pendulum. Handwriting experts leaned over magnified images, tracing the loops and curves of the anonymous letters, comparing them to the penmanship of the man who sat quietly at the defense table. They spoke of slant and pressure, of the unique way a hand moves across a page, trying to bridge the gap between ink and intent. The story was woven together, strand by strand. The attempted murder, the gun, the anger of a marriage dissolved. It seemed to fit. It seemed to offer that sense of completion the mind craves. And when the verdict finally came, declaring guilt, declaring a sentence of long years behind the high walls of a penitentiary, the town of Circleville let out a collective sigh. The boogeyman had a name. The shadow had been caught in a box. The fear could finally be laid to rest, tucked away in the archives of yesterday. But truth is rarely as straight a line as the streets of a round town. Even as the heavy iron doors clicked shut, sealing the accused away from the world, the ink did not run dry. The silence that the town had hoped for, the deep, undisturbed peace they believed they had earned, was interrupted once more. New letters began to appear. They drifted into mailboxes like autumn leaves, arriving from Columbus, arriving from places where the accused could not be. They carried the same voice, the same intimate, unsettling knowledge of private lives. They spoke to the warden, they spoke to the town, mocking the idea that the mystery had been solved. How could this be? The question hung in the air, suspended like dust motes in a shaft of afternoon sunlight. Was the man in the cell innocent, a victim of a coincidence so vast it defied logic? Or was he a mastermind, manipulating the mail from within the stone walls? Or, perhaps most disquieting of all, was the writer someone else entirely, someone still walking the streets, still buying coffee at the diner, still nodding politely to neighbors as the sun went down? The certainty that had settled over the town began to fray at the edges, but this time the panic did not return with the same sharp edge. Time has a way of softening even the hardest questions. The letters continued for a while, sporadic and strange, but the town had grown weary of the game. The people of Circleville chose, slowly and instinctively, to turn away from the shadows and back toward the light. Years drifted by, turning into decades. The 1980s faded into the 90s, and the world moved on. The sharp, stinging fear of the letters became a dull ache, and then, eventually, just a memory. A story told on porches, a legend whispered to newcomers, losing its jagged edges with every retelling until it became smooth, like a stone polished by a river. Paul Freshour spent a decade in prison, maintaining his innocence until the very end. When he was finally released, he returned to a world that had changed. He lived his remaining years in the quiet hum of obscurity, passing away in 2012, taking whatever secrets he held, or didn't hold, with him into the silence. And with his passing, the final tether to the active mystery was cut. The voice of the Circleville Writer, whoever they were, whatever they were, finally fell silent. The pen was set down, the stamps were left in the drawer, the mailboxes stood empty of accusations, holding only the mundane and peaceful correspondence of daily life, bills, birthday cards, circulars for the local grocery. Now, if you were to walk the streets of Circleville today, you would feel a profound sense of normalcy. The terror of those years has evaporated, leaving behind only the charm of a small American town. You might walk past the intersection where the truck was found and see only the quiet asphalt and the swaying branches of old trees. You might pass the homes where the letters were read with trembling hands and see only warm yellow light spilling from the windows, families gathering for dinner, the flickering blue light of televisions, the calm routine of evening settling in. The round town continues its circle, the geometry of the streets guiding travelers around and around, a continuous loop of community and history. Every October, the town erupts in the celebration of the pumpkin show, thousands of people gathering to celebrate the harvest, the air filled with the scent of cinnamon and falling leaves, the sound of laughter drowning out the whispers of the past. It serves as a gentle reminder that life is stronger than mystery, that joy is more enduring than fear. The Circleville Letters remain one of the great unsolved puzzles, a question mark at the end of a long sentence. We may never know the full truth. We may never know if it was one hand or many, if it was a conspiracy or a lone grievance. And perhaps, in this quiet moment, we can find peace in not knowing. There is a certain comfort in the unknown, in accepting that some corners of the world and some corners of the human heart will always remain in shadow. We do not need to solve every riddle to rest easy. We do not need to see every face to feel safe. The files are closed now. The paper has yellowed. The ink has faded. The story has returned to the mist from which it came. As we bring this narrative to a close, let your own mind begin to drift away from the details. Let the names, the dates, and the theories dissolve like sugar in warm water. They are no longer important. They are just echoes of a time long gone. Imagine the town of Circleville tonight. The sun has set long ago. The streetlights cast soft, amber pools of light on the sidewalks. The wind whispers through the cornfields that surround the town, a gentle, rhythmic rustling that sounds like the earth itself is breathing. The houses are dark and still. The people are asleep, safe in their beds, their dreams untroubled by the past. The mailboxes stand like silent sentinels at the end of driveways, empty and resting. Everything is quiet. Everything is still. And you, too, are part of this stillness. You have walked through the mystery, you have looked into the shadows, and you have come out the other side, into the calm, open space of the present moment. There is nothing left to solve here. There is nothing left to figure out. Feel the weight of your own body relaxing, sinking deeper into the surface beneath you. The tension of the story flows out of you, replaced by a warm, heavy sensation of comfort. The questions have all faded away, leaving only the silence. A silence that is not empty, but full of peace. The round town sleeps. The mystery sleeps. And now, it is time for you to drift, to let go, to follow the turning of the earth into the velvet embrace of the night. The story is over. The book is closed. Rest now, in the quiet, in the dark, in the deep, knowing peace of the end.